So a couple of weeks ago, I came across a story on the BBC Sport website about this ultra called the Tunnel Ultra. Now this is basically a 200-mile ultra in a 1-mile tunnel where runners come in and they do laps up and down the 1-mile tunnel. It's the longest disused kind of railway tunnel that's now been converted into a cycle tunnel in the whole of the UK. It's down just outside of Bath, about 2 miles outside of Bath, in a place called Combe Down. That's the tunnel right behind me. You can see some cyclists coming through. In this race, the runners are not allowed to wear headphones, not allowed music, they're not allowed to run side by side. They do it kind of solo, and they'll be in the darkness for up to 2 days, just popping out at the end and switching back. It's about the most brutal kind of running that you can possibly do. They've taken away all the comforts, all the things that you really like about running. It's the scenery, distractions, having other people alongside, having support. All of those things have been stripped back, and you've just got you versus this tunnel. And my first thought was, I wonder what that's like. My second thought was, I'm going to go and find out. So I've hopped on a train, come down from London to Bath, and I'm going to go into that tunnel and I'm going to see how long I can run for it. I think, I've got an idea of a target of how many ups and downs I'd like to do, but I really want to see what it's like, what happens to you mentally in there. So here I am, I've arrived, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. I've actually got Andy here with me, who's going to run with me a little bit. So I'm not entirely on my own, it's not proper race conditions, but we're going to go and see what it's like to run in the tunnel from the Tunnel Ultra. Let's go and get into it.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Yeah, so we're in the tunnel. This is the first lap, and already you can get a sense in here. It's pretty dark without a head torch on. There are lights on the wall so you can kind of see, but already you get a sense of just how brutal this would be to do 200 miles. I can't imagine having no sleep and going into your second day in this tunnel. Yeah, it's an interesting experience doing this first lap. I'm sure you'll settle. The smell is pretty damp, it's pretty musky. There's no wind, and it's at least sort of fairly warm in here. You can see the blinking of a bike light in the distance. It is quite eerie, yeah. I don't think, if you think about going into I guess you don't know whether it's daytime or nighttime, but that would be another interesting thing psychologically, when you get to the end and it's still dark and you know that you're in here on your own in the night. Yeah, this could be an interesting run.
Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy. And silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn, no closure, moving closer. No exposure, I just wanna be a loner. Some can't stay sober, looking over all their shoulders.
So around about every 9 minutes we emerge out of one end of the tunnel. Yeah, and you come out and you're on this kind of railway track. It's been paths, used to be an old railway line here. And yeah, it's in the green, kind of in and around the countryside around Bath. It's it's pretty isolated, but quite nice. I imagine during the race, when they must use some of these picnic benches or these areas here to be the aid stations. But yeah, we've done 7.3 miles. The other thing to say is actually I'm surprised that the Apple Watch Ultra 7.3 miles, Garmin Enduro 7.3 miles as well. They're absolutely sort of bang on in terms of the distance so far, even though we're going through the tunnel, which is great. Yeah, so the watches do kind of work tracking, and you can get some pacing in here, although I'm not really looking, I'm just running on feel. But yeah, we better go back in and do another one.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
14 legs done, coming up to 14 miles. Although that might be 13 legs because we're adding on a little bit extra. Now I'm lost. I knew this would happen. I haven't counted how many we've done. That is the first leg that has hurt a little bit. We've got a bit pushed a bit. But actually being in the tunnel, it's actually okay at the moment. I'm quite enjoying it in a way. It's not in any way as claustrophobic or as tense or as mind dulling or numbing as I thought it might be. We've had some things go like gone by on bike there, but got people on a skateboard, and we've seen some other runners, and yeah, okay so far. I think fueling now it's sort of kicking in, so because we've nearly done 14 miles. But yeah, it's kind of okay. So far so good. 2 hours, 15 minutes done. And I think there's 17 miles-ish done. I think we've done 16 and a bit laps. It's obviously very dark here. So I've been running for coming up to 3 hours, 2:45. And that's the first time now that the energy systems, I mean, this is marathon territory, but yeah, body is just starting to feel a bit tired. Mentally, not a problem. This is just kind of, I would say, just kind of like the normal fatigue that you probably feel from doing that kind of distance generally on the road. When the energy gets low, this is where the mindset kicks in, and that's when the tunnel and the other bits and pieces might start to set about you, basically, and start to sort of close in or whatever. So this is where it's going to get interesting, I think. We're kind of into the meat of it now. We keep ticking over. So 21 miles or so done, 3 hours 27. Andy's departing, he's done his bit. Now I'm going to go and do the last bit on my own, so I've got about another 10 miles to go. So this would be interesting because it's like solo in there. Makes a lot of difference obviously having someone to talk to for company, but now this would be kind of, yeah, it's going to be a different mental challenge going in and doing another 10 solo, but I feel good, feel fresh. So we're now down to the last two legs. 29.7 miles on the Apple Watch. We've got 31.6 on the Garmin. I think the Apple is more accurate for whatever reason. I go back in there, go down to the end, I turn around and come back. And that's the distance done, but then I'm at the wrong end of the tunnel, so I'm gonna have to go back again. So technically I've got 3 to do. Shit, bad. 3. It's all right, we got it. The tunnel. I'm enjoying you. Here we go. Back in the tunnel! Garmin says 34, Apple says 32. My legs say stop. Stop, stop, stop. Oh, the tunnel, man. It's mad. Because I don't feel like, I'm not bored of it. Like, I'm not bored of the tunnel. Like, my legs hurt like I'd run 30 miles, but I'm not bored of being in there. You know, my legs have started to scream in those last miles because I've run hard, but if you were going slower, like we've run faster than you would probably for an ultra normally. Like if you're doing 100k, you'd be much slower than that. And the monotony I thought would take hold, but it's good. So there, behind me, the tunnel is done. 34 miles according to Garmin, I don't know, like 32 on Apple. And yeah, all in about 5.5 hours running. Not too many stops, but some of that was kind of switching around at the ends and getting fuel out of my fuel bag. Interesting, that has been so interesting. Like I feel all right, I feel alive, I feel good. It was meditative, it wasn't as mundane and boring and difficult and mentally challenging as I thought it would be. My legs ache, you know, but that's a distance. But actually, mentally, I feel quite refreshed. I was enjoying it. There's a beat to running in there. There's a rhythm and a beat and a kind of pulsing kind of regularity to the up and down in the tunnel, and you know the bits that you're passing, and you know the mesmeric lights, and you know picking out little spots that you see time and time again that you know that's a bit of that mile done. You know, I think that mile distance is almost like the perfect distance up and back. I don't know whether that's because over the years you sort of trained myself to run in miles and it's a familiar bite-sized chunk mentally, but it worked, you know, it just worked. My only other race like this really, or thing that I've done like this, was the Adidas City Runs, where we ran for an hour around a loop, a 1 mile loop in the centre of London, and the idea was to run as far as you could in the hour. And I really enjoyed doing the loops and the sort of sense of movement through the same space where you had this pulsing, you know, you would pass different markers that in your mind kept you moving, and this had the same kind of feeling, and I was hoping it would. And far from being intense and boring and dull and difficult and horrible and all the things that you know you stripped away all the things that we runners love, you know, look at this beautiful scenery, I mean, where you'd probably rather be running, it wasn't as bad as you might think in there. And there's something quite nice about taking everything else away, and it's just you and your mind and a bit of darkness or low light, and just thinking. I mean, it helped having Andy for the first 20 miles. Definitely, you know, he having someone to chat to really helped the things pass. But even when I did the last 11 miles, which took me a couple hours, you know, it was fine. I enjoyed it. I didn't mind it on my own. And that's an experience that, yeah, I mean, a good one for mental toughness, but also maybe it's just me, maybe I've got a weird brain, but I quite enjoyed it. So anyway, when I'm getting cold and I've got to get back to the car and sort stuff out, but I will do a little kind of final update and talk through, you know, what I learned in there, what it was like, give you a bit of more of a dig into it once I've had a chance to process what I've just done. But yeah, 30 odd miles in a tunnel, tick. Sat on a bench then, waiting for Andy to come and get me after the tunnel run. I'm trying to sort of trying to make sense of how that was. It was, I mean, I feel kind of mentally fresh. That's the most interesting thing right now. So sometimes I think after a marathon you can feel like mentally exhausted and fatigued, and I feel quite mentally fresh. I feel like there's I don't know, there's something, it hasn't been mentally taxing. And I thought it would be the opposite. I thought it would be really quite mentally draining. I thought you'd have to dig in. I thought you'd have to use kind of lots of mental trickery to get through it. And actually I didn't have to use as much as I thought I would, and I probably didn't use as much mental trickery as I might do on a marathon, where you're surrounded by people and bustle and, you know, there's craziness going on. It's very, very calm in there. It's very quiet, it's very peaceful. You know, the isolation is quite pleasant in many ways. There's not, you know, there wasn't much traffic. The odd bike or the odd pedestrian, you know, sometimes these pedestrians who weren't wearing lights or whatever would merge and sort of seem in distance a bit ghost-like. And yeah, you know, it was quite intense when I first went in there. I found the feeling was quite intense, but it kind of drifted that, or whatever, it dissipated, and it actually became all right and quite pleasant. And you know, the sort of the dank kind of, or the musky smell just disappeared into the background. And then it was just you and the movement, really. You could hear your feet tapping along, and a bit like a train, you know, so you had this kind of rhythm. Occasionally you'd sort of, obviously you'd pass those kind of weird eyeballs and the sound halfway. You know, occasionally I'd catch a glimpse of the little markers on the floor. They had like 100-meter markers in both directions, so it'd tell you where you were in the tunnel. Occasionally you'd catch a glimpse of one of those, but I wasn't really looking at them. I didn't really find the need to. You know, sometimes when you're doing runs, you sort of hold on to those things like that. You kind of, they're the things that you keep ticking them off, or you keep looking at your watch. And I didn't really look at my watch very much either, because you've got that, you know where you're at, you know up and down, and you know you're doing the miles, so you don't really need to worry about that. I was running on feel, so I was just running how my energy kind of, the flow of my legs, and so there's actually quite a lot of freedom in it. And I don't know, yeah, it was freeing rather than enclosing, you know. I think that's my initial thought when I read about the story. I just thought, wow, that's going to feel penned in and enclosed and dark, and it didn't. I had the opposite sort of feeling mentally. I feel quite kind of bright and open, and yeah, and I think that's a fascinating thing to do, and far more fun than I really thought it might be.
Done.